Welcome to The World Awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
I'm Kirsty Bedford, journalist, editor and travel writer.
And I'm Belinda Jackson, author, travel journalist and columnist, and we're your weekly co-hosts.
Hello and welcome back. How are you this week, Belle?
Oh, I'm great, thanks, Kirsty. I have been finding the best Iraqi food in Melbourne, and then because I hadn't eaten enough, I traded the Melbourne winter for Port Douglas in far north Queensland to catch its annual food festival, Taste Port Douglas. We'll be doing a wrap on food festivals next week, so make sure you tune in for that one. And so what have you been up to this week while I've been flouncing around in Queensland?
Well, it sounds delicious and I can't wait to hear more about it. I've been head down, writing, subbing, proofing, and I'm off on a little Victorian getaway to Apollo Bay on the Great Ocean Road in regional Victoria. It's one of those places
nice.
where the journey's part of the experience, as they say. And people from all over the world come to Victoria just to drive down the Great Ocean Road. So I'm actually really looking forward to it because it's been a while since I've been down that way. And I think we're pretty lucky here in Victoria to have it on our doorstep. And when I do get there, there's going to be a bunch of girls waiting with a cheese platter and wine. What more could you want?
No, don't need anything. That's pretty much it. The Great Ocean Road, bucket list destination for a lot of people. So, and speaking of bucket lists, there are many to see around the world, but everyone's got a different perspective on what constitutes their bucket list. So, of course, what should be on that list? I find the whole concept quite interesting.
My problem with it is I think I'll never reach the end of the bucket because as soon as I tick something off, I just keep adding things. And when you work and travel like we do and you're writing about all these amazing places every day, it's pretty much impossible to have an endless list. So, it's pretty impossible to not have an endless list because, we're just always surrounded by it. So, but I do wonder what actually qualifies as bucket list. Is it a place or is it an experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are the iconic places that are sure to make most lists like, Uluru, Eiffel Tower, the Northern Lights. But research has shown, post-pandemic, people are broadening that bucket list to include experiences, things like hiking fjords in Norway, cruises in Antarctica, that sort of thing.
And we have mentioned early on in our podcast too about how revenge travel is still very much alive and well. And also how now we've lived through a pandemic, we don't want to risk not doing the things we love. So stats are also showing we're wanting to travel with extended family too because we've obviously missed out on being with them for so long. And for many people who have family on the other side of the world, that's like you, Belle. It could be like meeting halfway in places like Thailand. So anyway, what are some of the places that you would add to your bucket list, Belle?
I've had to think really hard about this, and some of them are a bit bizarre. I want to eat my way through Lebanon, and I really want to go to Afghanistan. It's just, I really want to take a short walk through the Hindu Kush, to quote the great travel writer Eric Newby, which I grew up reading. I also have some long-haul train trips on my list, so that includes finally doing the Trans-Siberian Railway. Who knows when that's going to be possible. I really love sleeper trains, and I think that whole train culture of Eastern Europe and Russia is absolutely fascinating. But then the other one, and much closer to home, is I want to see the Aurora Australis, which is the southern lights, which you can see in Tassie and even off the coast of Victoria. So I've got this hike in mind that I really want to do down on Wilson's Prom and do it when there's a lot of night activity. So that's my list. What about yours?
Well, my list isn't really about places or famous sites, but I'm really interested in experiences with unique cultures and adventure. I'm not really a fly and flop type of person. And even when we take the family away, I make the teenagers get out and hike and bike and kayak and do whatever adventures we can find. So I'm going to put at the top of my list cycling around Sardinia and hiking in British Columbia, seeking out grizzly bears, seeing mountain gorillas in Rwanda and Uganda with operators who are doing the right thing, of course, and helping local communities because even though everyone's talking about that now, but I genuinely love going places where I can, give back to local communities and meet people behind a place. And this is exactly the type of experience that Charles Street from Inkwazi Adventures offers in South Africa on his tours. And I actually chatted with him for the podcast this week. And Charles talks about how giving back when you travel is not only the right thing to do, but how it completely will reset your perspective on life. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Thank you very much for having me, Kirsty.
Tell us a bit about your background and what made you transition into travel.
Yeah, thank you. I'm obviously born in South Africa. I spent half my time there, and I guess this kind of brought me into three of my passions. One, outdoor adventures, both here in Australia and in South Africa. But secondly, kind of the uniqueness of the South African landscapes, so the bushveld and the animals, which, it's pretty hard to kind of get here in Australia. And then thirdly, just really kind of enjoy when I do travel to kind of make a difference when I can do that. And so this is what kind of got me into starting Inkwazi Adventures and kind of our whole kind of vision of, changing lives one adventure at a time.
So you've lived in Perth for some time, I believe. And what were you doing before you got into the travel industry?
Yes, I've lived in Perth and also spent about 12 years in Sydney. My kind of, day job is really working in strategy development. And so that's kind of my background is kind of strategy, but technology in particular, so technology strategy. And I guess that's where I got really kind of interested in as our lives become more technology driven, the importance of disconnecting from technology and getting out in the outdoors and spending that time completely off the grid or offline, that I kind of saw the importance and difference that can really make in your day and your week and just your whole mindset.
So we'll talk a bit more specifically about some of your incredible tours that you do, and maybe you want to start by telling us a bit about, you did a TED talk, and I'll put a link in the show notes, about a little girl in South Africa who walked 20 kilometres a day to get to school, and I think that sort of really explains quite clearly what you're trying to achieve when people join your tours.
Yeah, definitely. So our tours are based on, we call it a concept of, it's a bit of a play on words, but we play on this bicycle. And so when we talk about our life-changing tours, there's two components. The first kind of wheel of the bicycle, if I can call it that, is about changing lives. And so we kind of focus on education, which leads to employment, which then obviously empowers people to take on life. And so the first part of our tours is we fundraise and raise money to buy bicycles for students who live in quite remote areas in South Africa, and often, like you mentioned, walk up to 20 kilometers a day just to get to school and back. And so what generally happens is these students will get really exhausted. They end up not going to school on a regular basis, which then obviously leads to them dropping out of school. And so a simple thing like a bicycle can give them easier and safer access to school. And we've seen through our previous years of these drops that the schools we've delivered bicycles to, they're on average, the attendance goes up by 20%, academic performance goes up by more than 15%. And so these students get a better chance at life because they finish their education at school, and then they can go on to study at university or college and then get better employment. And so that's kind of the first part of our adventure. The second part is then the life-changing experience for the adventurers who come with us. And so we talk about this concept of reset, reflect, and then reconnect. And so when you go on these bicycle drops, your perspective on life is really reset because you're taken out of your comfort zone, and you're kind of spending time in these communities with the kids, and you see the impact these bicycles have had on them. And you kind of look at your own life and perspective and kind of have a bit of a reset moment. But then when you go on these hiking safaris for 4 days, you have time to pause and kind of slow down and reflect on that time, and then when you come back into life, you can reconnect with what's actually important. And so, yeah, that first part in the story about Ria really kind of, that was from our last drop in last year when we did the bicycle drop. And this little girl who's probably about 9 or 10 years old, so the same age as my kind of daughters, she came up to me and she's never ridden a bicycle before. And so I said, well, let me help you kind of get on the bicycle. And she said, let's go around the block and I'll help her. At the time, I didn't realize that the block was 2 kilometers long. So that was quite a journey. But I think what really grabbed me was just this determination and drive in this little girl to kind of really learn how to ride this bicycle. And, you know, she said to me, by the time we get back to school, I'm going to ride this bicycle. And there was no complaints from her. Never did she say, oh, I can't do this, it's too hard. And I think the bit that gave me real goosebumps really was when I asked her halfway through, because I had to take a break from this long run, with the bicycle. But she said, I asked her, Ria, what do you want to do one day when you grow up? And she said, I want to become a social worker. And that really grabbed me, because this little girl who almost, didn't have a chance at life, or didn't, was walking 20 kilometers a day to get to school, wants to grow up one day to make a difference in someone else's life and help them. And so just having that opportunity to go on this adventure and change the life of a little girl like Ria is really kind of, what we're trying to create and kind of make a difference.
Amazing. And are you seeing that people are increasingly, because the research is showing people are increasingly wanting to travel like this, to do things where there's actually purpose to their trips? And is that the feedback you're getting from people on your trips?
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's definitely something that people are looking for. I think, we talk a lot about, and it's been quite a while since COVID, but I think people are looking for that. Getting purpose back in their lives, and in particular when, in our busy lives of just rushing from the next thing to next thing in our busy weeks, people are saying, what can I do that's more than just the daily grind? And so we find people come on the trip really come back with, like we talk about the new perspective on life, but just that opportunity to kind of feel like you've gone on this adventure, but you've made a big difference in someone else's life, a long-term impact in their lives. But I think often they don't realize the impact it's had on their own life, and so when they come back, they look at life in a different view, which is quite powerful.
And whereabouts specifically are you going? Is it which parts of South Africa are you primarily focused on?
Yeah, thanks. Good question, actually. So when we do the bicycle drops, we go to quite remote areas in South Africa. So last year we went to an area called Madikwe. It's quite a few. It's about 3 or 4 hours outside of Johannesburg, and it's quite remote. So even just looking at the communities and how they live gives you that different perspective on life. And then when we go up and do the hiking safaris, we actually go into the Kruger National Park and some of those kind of game parks close by, which is very, off the grid, disconnected from technology, and you're really immersed in the nature and the wilderness of the South African bushveld.
Incredible. And what, obviously it's pretty obvious what some of the significant changes are to the lives of the children and their families in order to be giving them these bikes. So what are some of the other changes, and sort of what is the feedback you're getting from the communities that you're visiting, and how important is it to those communities?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's quite powerful, because we often talk about the ripple effect of what one bicycle can do, right? And so we received a letter about 2 years ago from one of the principals where he said, he was quite amazed by how this whole school was energized by just these bicycles that they received. So their kind of average academic completion rate in year 12 went from 35% to over 85%, which is massive, and so that's kind of the impact we see. But if you think about the longer term impact, these students are now finishing school, they're going to university, and they can now get a job, which then when they come back to the community, they can make a real big difference. And so one of the other stories I really love is when some of these students have finished school, they actually hand their bicycle down to the younger students because they've seen the value in just having this bicycle and transport to school and back. And so it's really incredible how this kind of, one small change can lead to a massive impact and long-term change in the community and their parents and their families.
And where do you get the bikes initially from? Are they purchased with some of the funds from people going on the tours, or are they donated to you?
Yeah, so we talk about our tour adventure that people go on start long before the actual adventure, because we do a big fundraising campaign. So we raise funds we've got some small businesses involved who sponsor some bicycles. We continue to look for obviously more support. People and their friends and families and work colleagues get involved in their adventure, and so you can we basically fundraise the money, and then through an organisation we've partnered with called Bikes for ERP, they kind of purchase the bicycles, and we partner with them to do these bicycle drops. So 100% of the money we fundraise actually goes to the bicycles. We don't use any of that money for the tours, and the people who come on the tour, they kind of pay to come on the tour, but they do their own fundraising as well, because that's part of the experience. Is if you fundraise for 1 or 2 or 10 bicycles, you're actually on the ground delivering those bicycles to the students, so you can see the actual kids who get the bicycle.
Incredible. It's such an amazing and fantastic initiative, and well done on it. I could talk about it for hours, but we're running out of time. So we're going to end today talking about a question that we ask all of our interviewees, which is, what's the most bizarre situation you've found yourself in during your travels?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And when I think about it, last year when we went on this adventure, the second part was the hiking safari in the Kruger National Park, and that in itself is quite a unique experience because you sleep and you eat in the bush in tents. And so the third night we actually slept in the dry riverbed, and so what you do is every 3 minutes or so you have a spotlight and you look around just to see what animals are coming through. And we had this experience where on the one side of the riverbed there was a group of elephants that came, and we thought that's okay, they're kind of just off the side. And then we looked on the right hand side and there was also a group of elephants, and they were trying to get to each other, and we were in the middle, which is not always ideal. And so you can see them getting a little bit agitated, and you realize how small you are actually compared to these groups. But it was really just amazing to see the professional guide and the way he communicated to the main elephant, who was the head of the group, and managed to get them to change their mind and move around. But for those 5 or 10 minutes, which probably felt like an hour, just having that kind of intimidating experience of this group of elephants who are trying to work out why you're in the middle of them was quite an amazing experience.
Incredible. Thank you so much. It's been fantastic to talk to you, Charles, and we'll put all the links in the show notes for people so they can look at joining one of your incredible purposeful travel experiences.
That was Charles Street, and you can learn more about Inkwazi Adventures at inkwaziadventures.com.au, and we'll add a link to our show notes at theworldawaits.au, where you can also click to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Our tip this week is about how to avoid ruining your holiday and your life with an airport selfie. This is because hackers are using boarding passes that people post online to hack your social media accounts. So there was a recent survey by cybersecurity experts NordVPN, which showed that almost 85% of travellers are worried about being hacked while travelling. But we're still posting our boarding passes and even passports on social media.
And they say even if only the barcode of your flight ticket is visible in the picture, hackers can scan it and find out your full name, reservation number, passenger name record, and even sometimes get contact information. And of course, that data can then be used by the hacker to cancel your flights, steal money, or even steal your entire identity.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening. So those experts say that hackers might even call a traveller during their trip pretending to be an airline representative and ask for credit card details to confirm a return flight. Cyber criminals can also gather more information about their victims on social media and then try to call the airline pretending to be a traveller. So, and a lot of that, I've heard is tied through frequent flyer programs as well, which people don't protect the same way that they protect things like their credit cards. So what can you do to avoid being hacked? Well, for a start, they advise you should post all of your photos when you get home, because then people obviously don't know that you're not home. Now, I find that was a tricky one because, Instagram is instant, right? So that's a bit of a conundrum. But, of course, don't post your boarding pass even if you're just showing that you're in seat 1A. Maybe you can have the little bit at the corner or something like that. But definitely, which I've seen people in the industry, friends doing. What are some other things you can do, Kirsty?
Yeah, other things you can do is make sure your account settings are set to private, which we obviously don't always do either. And one of the most important pieces of information to know before you post anything online is who you're sharing the information with. And you shouldn't ever post photos of your, like you said earlier, of your passport or plane tickets or any other documentation. Really, at the end of the day, that's basically, really what you can do is make sure that you just don't do it to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. And also being careful of free public Wi-Fi. This one's quite interesting because these networks are easily monitored by hackers. So one of the best ways to safely use public Wi-Fi is by installing a VPN on your phone, which is something that I really have to pick up my act on.
You're listening to The World Awaits.
This week, Bella's talking to Catherine Best, a Melbourne-based travel writer, author and caravanning connoisseur, about where to haul your wagon around Australia.
Catherine, welcome to The World Awaits. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Belle. So lovely to be here.
Hey, I think you are the queen of the caravan. That's what I'm going to dub you, with your book out as well, which is timed in with an enormous growth in caravanning, in the popularity of caravanning in Australia. How big are we talking? Are we talking, is this a thing? Is this a massive thing?
Caravanning is huge and it's really having a moment. So we saw a massive boom in caravanning during the peak of the pandemic, but it's actually continued. So last year we had a record year for caravanning. There were more new caravans hitting the market than ever before. So just under 50,000 new caravans hit the market. Now that's
50,000.
according to, it's huge. So it's according to figures from the Caravan Industry Association of Australia. And so total number of registrations for caravans and campervans was almost 800,000. And that number's growing by about 4 to 5% a year. So caravanning is booming. It hasn't abated since international borders reopened. It's just becoming more and more popular.
And why do you think that is? Why would you choose a van over, say, staying in a hotel room?
I think Australians have always had a fondness for, that great Australian road trip. And with caravanning, it's just that wonderful freedom. It's being able to camp in comfort. So you have your house on wheels that's ready to go at a moment's notice. You just, grab a change of clothes, grab some perishable food, and off you go to wherever your heart takes you. And unlike other more traditional forms of camping, there's very minimal setup and pack down time. So it's so convenient. And for me, it really is about that comfort factor of having all the mod cons of home, and not having to, make those big sacrifices when you're on the road. And of course, it's the cost factor. We are in a cost of living crisis at the moment. And caravanning is a really economical way of traveling. You don't have those really exorbitant costs that you can have with hotels and eating out. You can self-cater, you can free camp, you can stay in low-cost campsites for as little as $10 a night. So it's a way of exploring the country on a budget and being immersed in nature, not in a cookie-cutter hotel room.
Well, can I just stay on that budget idea? Because while once you're established, then and as you say, you can hit free campsites, and you can streamline it. But you've got quite a bit of a budget at the outset. So I know that your very fabulous van, Frankie, was an investment for you. But if people just don't have that amount of money to sink into a van, is there any way they can get around that?
Absolutely. So caravans are like handbags. There's one for all budgets. There are people who go out and spend $200,000 plus on a bells and whistles van with all the mod cons. It's got an aluminium frame. It's got airbag suspension. It's fully off-road. You can take them anywhere. At the other end of the scale, you have people who buy beautiful vintage vans that were, built tough as nails in the 70s, and they do these amazing little refurbishments.
Yeah,
and you can pick that up for less than $5,000. We've got friends who just bought a 20-year-old caravan for $13,000. And of course, whatever you spend, they are an investment. So you can make your money back when you sell. So it doesn't have to be a really expensive, proposition entering the van life community.
But I guess, so that's a really great point, because then that allows you to, as you say, every road is your road. How, like while some caravan parks have awesome facilities, I've stayed in Big Fours with free yoga, and they've got pools and trampolines for kids, which are all sensational. What if I don't want to run with the pack? How off-road can you get with a van on the back as opposed to, say, camping or motorhomes or something like that?
Well, caravans these days, you can get your big, massive blacktop vans, they call them, which prefer the highways. But you can also get off-road vans that you can take on dirt tracks. You can take them on the beach. You can even do water crossings with them. And the facilities these days, caravans are designed to be off-grid for sometimes a week or even more. They have solar panels and battery management systems, big water tanks, grey water tanks. So really, if you are fully set up, you can be escaping the crowds. You can be on a deserted beach somewhere, or in the desert, or in the bush, with no one around you, no power, no water, and you can comfortably live, so long as you brought food with you, for a week or more. They really are a way of being self-contained with everything that you need. You're limited only by your imagination.
Amazing. So, how long can you stay away? Like, how long can you be off grid, I guess, with the setup that you've got? Bearing in mind, you also have your husband and 3 children, so that impacts on. You've got things like water as well as to consider. How many bags of Cocoa Pops you've got stuffed in the caravans.
So for us, water is always the biggest consideration. So that's the one thing that limits how long we can be off-grid. Yeah. And we can get probably about 6-7 days. We've got 2 water tanks, so 190 litres in total. If we're going off-grid where we have no access to clean water, which we have done before, we also have jerry cans of water that we can take with us. We find running out of food isn't an issue. There's lots of, non-perishable items, and we've got a pretty big freezer that we can take. We have a self-contained, a chemical toilet as well. And often places, if there's no facilities at all, they may have a drop toilet, which is helpful. But water is the big one. So we have to be very vigilant and judicious with how we use that, and watching the kids, because they'll go to wash their hands. And particularly during those COVID years, we tell our kids, wash your hands, what's the happy birthday song we used to do? That all goes out the window when you're camping. Those hand wipes go a long way because every drop is really precious. But if you're camped by a lake or a river, you can actually get pumps where you can pump water from a river. And if you have a separate potable water tank, so your drinking water, if you have a separate tank just for every day, showering, hand washing, that sort of thing, you can be off grid for a really long time.
Oh, incredible! Because you've covered so much of Australia researching your book. Do you want to share a couple of your favourite caravan spots? I know, everybody has their secrets, but a place that you'll always return to. Where is somewhere that has got your caravanning heart?
Yeah, so look, my favourite place would have to be on the Ningaloo coast in Western Australia. It's
Beautiful.
Such an incredible part of the world. We swam with whale sharks there with our kids. We did some great four-wheel driving. It's the largest fringing reef in the world. So we were at a low-cost camp called South Lefroy Bay. It's part of the former Ningaloo station, and this is really quintessential caravanning, where you pull up literally on the beach. Our nearest neighbours were about 20-30 metres away. We were having campfires every night, watching the sunset over the water, swimming, snorkeling. There was turtles in the water.
Oh, amazing.
Really incredible experiences. It's very popular with people who fish and, put the tinny in. So that was one of my favourite places. Very much a place where you have to be prepared. It's self-contained. There's no toilet facilities. There's no water. And the road going in is, it's a dirt track and it's very heavy sand in parts. So you need a four-wheel drive and a semi-off-road caravan at a minimum. But that's probably my number one. Another place that I really love is a place called Potato Point. It has a funny name. And that's just north of Narooma on the New South Wales south coast in Eurobodalla National Park. So this is a special place for me because it is actually a tourist park. So it has your full suite of amenities, although there's not many powered sites. Most are unpowered. But you can park up on the foreshore overlooking the beach, and every site pretty much has a fire pit, so you can have campfires. You can check out the surf conditions from your bed in your caravan. That's how close you are to the water.
Amazing.
And the place is literally teeming with kangaroos and wallabies and emus, and it backs onto forest. So it has a wonderful kind of camping atmosphere, but with the benefit of full amenities for people who prefer that style of caravanning. And you're only 20 minutes out of Narooma, where you can check out some of the restaurants and things there. So for people who are more what you would call your black top caravanners, so they don't like getting on the dirt road and being too remote, and like having a hot shower, that's really perfect for them.
There's something to be said about that. Thanks for sharing those two great spots. And I'm going to give you our last question, which we ask all our guests. What is the most bizarre experience you found yourself in during your many, many travels?
Okay, so this goes back a few years and it's got absolutely nothing to do with caravanning. But many years ago, I had a very, let's say it was a little bit confronting massage in Vietnam, in Hanoi.
Okay, tell me.
Where the massage therapist, who was a woman, had a little bit of an obsession with my breasts, shall we say. So in a very non-sexual, innocent way. But she was doing a lovely massage. She got me to roll over. And it became quite apparent that, she found something about my breast quite fascinating. And in broken English, she asked me if I'd had children before, and at that stage I said no. And she said, "Oh, very nice." And she was just mesmerized by them. And then she went on to tell me, well, she actually took her top down and took her breasts out and was showing me hers as a comparison and telling me how she had had a baby. And so I had this very strange, non-sexual, it was more a moment of curiosity, and a lot was lost in translation. So I didn't quite know whether I should be flattered or a bit confronted. And yeah, anyway, it was a nice massage, and fortunately it didn't go any further than that. But my husband was down the corridor having a massage as well, and I was very concerned about what sort of massage he might be getting in this establishment, which we were assured was above board by the hotel where we were staying.
And so he just had a lovely, nice massage.
Well, he maintains to this day that it was just an ordinary massage. So yes, and
I think you just leave it at that, don't you? There's no more questions required for that one.
What happens in Vietnam stays in Vietnam.
I was not expecting that one. Catherine, thanks for sharing all of your expertise and advice about caravanning and about massages in Vietnam. And we will add those places that you mentioned onto the show notes, which and also where people can find your book, Ultimate Caravan Trips in Australia. Thanks so much for joining us on The World Awaits. It's been great to have you here.
They were some great tips from author Catherine Best, author of Ultimate Caravan Trips Australia, about her favourite caravan spots. We'll share them in the show notes for you. Take a look at theworldawaits.au.
And that brings to a close The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods, and you can find us at theworldawaits.au. And where can people find you, Kirsty?
I'm at Kirsty Writes on Instagram and Facebook. That's Kirstie Writes. And where can people find you, Belle?
You'll find me at globalsalsa.com or Instagram on global_salsa. Thanks for listening. See you next week.